Hello folks, this is going to see a compilation of photos and video here on about building a set of adjustable seats for my airplane. I've been flying this plane for many years. I've decided to put in better adjustable seats. So this video about designing and making a set of sliding seats for my Wag-Aero 2+2, the footage and the photos were taken about a year and a half to 2 years ago, and these videos had been on my channel. I'm reproducing them here today with a different video editor, and hopefully the quality will be improved from what I did in the past. This diagram here shows some of the things I was thinking of: seats sitting on rails. These are some of the raw materials that I've chosen to use: some flat stock steel, two different varieties of 4130 chrome molybdenum. This will be the actual rail that the seats will slide on. It's 5/8 diameter by 120 thou wall, and this is what the chair legs will sit on, and this will slide over top of the bottom rail. So it's 7/8 by 120 wall, which leaves it just over 5/8 diameter. This is a portion of the original seat, and those side rails, heavy wall, they'll have some weight. But this has been cut away, and the weight equivalent will be similar. So these are the rails. I've gone ahead and obviously done some work on them, and they're set up pretty much to the way I want them. These are the sliding tubes that will sit on. The chair legs will actually sit on and will slide up and down the rails. And this photo is to show you the groove cut in the bottom, so that the groove will pass over the supports and the bearing fits through a small hole. So this photo here shows kind of a better close-up of the original seat the way it was. The bottom rails and the rail that's going to replace it, and the little bearing sitting on the tube. Here we are with the foundation of this project, building my adjustable seats. And the first thing you got to start with is a level table. If you don't have that, you beat. So if you see there, you can see the level, nice and perfectly level. The next most important thing in the design is that this is how the little piece here is how the whole set of seats are actually going to slide. So it's a tube and tube, both heavy wall tubes, and the idea is that this has to be able to slide over the mounting points, and that way you get the maximum amount of adjustment. Now my seats themselves are about 14 inches apart. These are 13.5. The centers on these. The legs are about 14. This is 24. So we're going to get approximately 10 inches of travel. And the most important thing in this particular project is that the travel is in the back direction. The way the seats sit normally in the airplane, I believe I've left at least 2 inches of travel this way for someone with shorter legs, and that would give me an additional 8 inches to move the seat back for exiting the plane, and that's one of the big things I'm after. That's why it extends out so long. The other thing you'll notice, it's not flat, and that's because the floorboards are actually shaped this way, kind of flat, and then they rise up this way. So this ramp is to clear the odd shape in the floorboards as the floorboards in the airplane are actually rising from this point on, so they don't jam into the floor. So in order for that for the tube on tube to work, and for this thing the outer tube to slide over top of this tube, and the support piece, is it has to have this groove cut in it. So if you turn it upside down, you can see that this passes on over here.
Now, the other critical thing with this part, why is the hole in the top? Well, the hole is in the top so that a bearing can sit in there. Now, I'll get into more detail about that later in another video. But the purpose is, when this is sitting on here, there will be a seat leg will come down on that, and it'll be welded around here. And inside the seat leg will be this bearing. Now this slides pretty nice, but if you imagine a 200-pound person sitting on top of that, trying to slide back steel on steel, it might work, but not likely. So the intent here is that the bearing protrudes through just enough so that the weight of the person is carried by this bearing.
This is a shot of how I jigged it. The critical dimension is the back dimension of the back legs, and that is locked into the front legs by the piece of wood there that keeps in at 14 or however many inches apart. Then this video shows the construction to this point and its ability to slide about 10 inches. Today I'm here with the airplane at the airport in the hangar. So I'll demonstrate first how you get into this airplane. You step on the step or stirrup, I call it. Put your knee on the seat. Swing your left leg in. Now, these seats have been moved, so that makes it a lot easier. Now, sliding these seats up to where I would normally sit when I'm flying, about here. And if you can see, that's my thigh, and my knee is up here. So when you're alone, it's not a big deal. Grab a hold of these two struts or these two tubes on the fuselage in the cockpit. Swing your butt into the other seat and kick your legs out and come on to the tire. But if you got somebody sitting beside you, you can't do that. So and I don't know what Wag-Aero intended for people to get out of this airplane. When my seats were fixed, and there were two people in it, you pretty much had to stand up in the cockpit, like this, and do the reverse of getting in. You had to reach back here into a flying position, try to get your foot in that stirrup that you can't see. Once you got it, you can then put your weight on it, and then try to get your leg out of here. See what I mean? It ain't easy. And step back out. What a pain in the ass. So, re-demonstrating. So we gave these seats about 10 inches of travel. This is all the way forward. And this is all the way to the back. And now, here's my knee and there's the door. So I can easily get my leg out. I'm not the most flexible guy, so I give it a little assistance with a pull, but if you've got shorter legs, you're certainly going to get out easier. And you can drop down on the floor. For me, I always step on the tire and I get out. Now I built this airplane from scratch. It took me about 12 and a half years to get it to fly the first time. And because of all that, I built the seats the way I saw fit. Now, to Wag-Aero's credit, they tell you to take a set of seats out of the Cessna, as you can see in this diagram I'm about to show you. Cut 3 inches out of the center, weld it all back together, and I figured, well, if I'm going to go to all that trouble, I might as well just weld one from scratch. So that's why I made these, and when I installed them,
I had ground adjustable rails on the bottom, but they certainly weren't adjustable while you were sitting in them, and they weren't adjustable in flight or prior to flight. I don't recommend adjusting seats too much while you're actually in flight. So anyway, the main reason I actually did this mod was partly when I was flying by myself, it was no big deal, except the seats were there, and I could, like I showed you before, I could swing my butt over onto the other seat and legs out, and it wasn't an issue. But you know, my wife started flying with me, and I've had other people in the airplane, and it was getting to be a hassle. And I quickly realized it's not just a hassle; it was actually a safety concern. I mean, if you can't get out of the airplane in the case of an incident, that's just crazy. So I put these in, and I'm quite happy that I did.
So this portion of the video will show some of the details on how I installed the weight-bearing bearings into the seat legs. So there's a slot cut in the back of the chair leg, and the bearing is inserted as you can see here again. The bearing slides in from the back, so if you had to replace one, it's pretty easy to do, and it's held in place with a standard 3/16 inch fastener. These are just pins for temporary use. Now what I'm doing here is I'm putting a little Sharpie mark on the bearings, and the purpose of that, you'll see in a minute, is when I move the seat, I want to be able to see that the bearings are actually turning when the seat moves fore and aft. And the reason for that is the bearings have to turn, otherwise they're not going to take some of the weight. And so they have to, you know, they have to take up some of the weight, but they won't. They can't be installed so tight that it won't move. So the bearings are moving, and the little color dot is rolling, so it's all good. I have to admit that I found it quite difficult to get those bearings installed exactly the way I wanted them and the way they needed to be. And because of it, I kind of chickened out or opted for a different system for the front legs. The other reason, I mean, it was difficult, but the other reason is because you'll see further on, is I needed some way to be able to adjust the seats and put locking pins. So I put these bearings behind the front legs, and another reason for doing that is one of the legs is straight up and down, while the other one comes in at an angle. And I put the angle on the inner leg because that's where the flap handle is, so it creates a bit of a V between the two seats to allow flap handle to go up and down. And this is a much easier, faster way to be able to attach the second bearings on the front. So this photo here shows the adjustment holes that I drilled into the lower rails, and then this is the simple spring and vertical bar that I used to lock it. And this photo here shows basically what I did was put in a JB welded a bolt into that tube and then put a big washer on it to prevent the seats from sliding off the rails.
I don't know if any of you would be interested in making a set of seats the way I did this, but hopefully the previous video and this one will give you some idea of how to do it if you wish to follow my steps.